They've told you for years that pike in the dead of winter just stop, that they sit on the bottom, mouths shut, waiting for spring. What if I told you that's a complete lie, designed to explain away empty-handed trips? The truth is, they are feeding. You're just looking in the wrong universe. In this video, we're going to expose the one secret about pike behavior in the dead of winter that completely changes the game. This isn't about a new lure or a fancy gadget. This is the biological reason you've been failing, and I promise, by the end of this, you'll look at a frozen lake in a whole new way. So let me ask you, do you believe pike truly have an off switch in winter, or is it something else? Let me know down in the comments. Every ice angler knows the frustration. Early ice is great, late ice is fantastic, but that middle period, the dead of winter, it can be brutal. We call it glukhozim'e, a time when the easy bites disappear. For generations, the common wisdom has been to just drill over the deepest hole in the lake, drop a big bait, and wait, and wait, and wait. We do it because that's what our grandfathers did. It's comfortable, it's tradition. But this tradition is based on a flawed assumption that a cold pike is a lazy pike. We've accepted this fact without questioning the why. We've been focusing on the fish without understanding the world it's forced to live in under feet of ice and snow. First, let's shatter the biggest myth, the dead lake. When you're standing on the ice in mid-January, the world feels silent, frozen, and lifeless. It's easy to imagine that it's the same way under the ice, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The ecosystem down there is in a desperate, slow-motion battle for survival. Every living thing, from the tiniest invertebrates to the largest pike, is fighting for the one resource that's rapidly disappearing: oxygen. We think about the cold, but the real key to this whole puzzle isn't temperature, it's what the fish are breathing. The lake isn't dead, it's suffocating. And understanding this single fact is the first step to finding fish. So, what does dead of winter actually mean for the water itself? Once the ice caps the lake and snow covers the ice, you cut off two vital things: new oxygen from the air and sunlight. Without sunlight, the weeds and phytoplankton that produce oxygen during the summer start to die off. Instead of producing oxygen, their decay actively consumes it. Imagine sealing a room and then lighting 100 candles. That's what's happening in the lake. The oxygen level is on a steady decline. This process creates a massive environmental pressure that forces every fish to change its behavior in ways we rarely consider. Let's talk more about oxygen because it is the absolute currency of the winter lake. For a pike, it's more important than food, more important than structure. Think about it yourself. You can go days without food, but only minutes without air. It's the same for them. As oxygen levels, or dissolved oxygen, drop in certain areas of the lake, those spots become biologically uninhabitable. A beautiful-looking weed bed that held fish all fall might now be an oxygen-depleted death trap. The pike know this. They have to know this to survive. Their entire existence in midwinter becomes a quest to find water with just enough oxygen to live comfortably. Now let's look at the pike's metabolism. Yes, it slows down dramatically. A pike in 35-degree water doesn't need to eat 3 times a day. Its body is in a state of extreme energy conservation. Imagine your phone in the freezing cold. The battery drains in a fraction of the time. The pike's body is the same. It can't afford to waste energy chasing a lively baitfish all over the place. But here's the critical part. Slow does not mean stopped. It still needs to eat to survive the winter. It just becomes an incredibly efficient, calculating predator that will only expend energy for a guaranteed easy meal. It's not lazy, it's a survivor. This leads us to the number one mistake every angler makes: fishing the same old spots. We all have them. That point that's always good in October, or that deep weed edge that produces in June. In the dead of winter, you have to forget them. Those spots were good because of a combination of factors, like cover and baitfish location, that simply don't apply anymore. The rules of the game have changed. The baitfish have moved, and the pike have moved with them. Continuing to fish your summer honey hole is like trying to find deer in an open field in the middle of a blizzard. You're hunting a ghost. So, what about the other old piece of advice? Just Fish the deepest hole. This can be the biggest trap of all. While some deep basins can hold stable water, in many lakes, especially fertile ones, the deepest water is the first to lose oxygen. All that decaying matter from the summer settles into the bottom of these holes. The decomposition process sucks the oxygen right out of the water column, starting from the bottom up. You could be sitting over 50 feet of water, and the bottom 20 feet might have almost no oxygen. The fish physically cannot live there. You can have the best lure in the world, but you can't catch a fish that isn't there. To find the pike, you first have to understand its food source. What are the baitfish doing? Perch, shiners, ciscos, they're facing the same oxygen problem. They will actively flee these low oxygen zones. They begin to suspend higher in the water column or gather in huge, slow-moving schools in very specific areas where the water is slightly better. They become lethargic and easy to pick off. Remember our energy-conserving pike? It's not going to dig through an oxygen-poor weed bed for one small perch. It's going to find these huge schools of dazed, slow-moving bait and position itself for the easiest meal of its life. The pike's mindset shifts from an aggressive hunter to a hyper-efficient opportunist. In the summer, a pike might chase a spinnerbait 20 feet. It has the energy, the oxygen, and the warm water to support that. In the winter, that same chase is a massive, potentially life-threatening waste of energy. The pike will not move far. It will position itself in a place where food will come to it. It needs a meal that requires almost zero effort. It will wait perfectly still for a slow, dumb, easy baitfish to swim right past its nose. This is why aggressive jigging often fails. You're signaling too much work to the fish. Let's think about how the pike uses its environment now. Its ambush mentality is still there, but the definition of an ambush spot has changed. It's no longer just about visual cover like a weed line or a log. The new cover is an invisible edge, a seam in the water. It's the border between low oxygen water and acceptable oxygen water. A pike might sit perfectly still just on the good side of that line, waiting for baitfish to wander out of the bad water, disoriented and vulnerable. You can't see this edge on any map or sonar. It's an invisible wall, and it's where the predators are waiting. We also have to consider atmospheric pressure. While it affects fish all year, it has a more pronounced effect on the lethargic fish of midwinter. A stable or slowly rising barometer is often your best friend. The fish are already in a delicate state, and a major pressure drop can put them down completely. They become even less willing to move. On these days, your presentation has to be incredibly subtle and placed directly on their nose. A high, stable pressure system, on the other hand, seems to give them just a little more comfort and can trigger a subtle feeding window. Paying attention to the barometer is no longer just a suggestion. It's a critical piece of the puzzle. This brings us back to the lie about pike fasting all winter. It's simply not true. They can't. They would not survive. What they are doing is feeding in very short, infrequent windows and in very specific locations. An entire population of pike in a lake might only feed for 20 minutes a day, and they will do it in the 1 or 2 areas of the lake where conditions are optimal. If you are not in that exact spot during that exact window, you will be convinced the fish aren't biting. It's not that they aren't eating, it's that you're not at the restaurant when the doors open. The secret, then, is not in finding big, obvious structures. It's about finding micro-locations. These are tiny, often overlooked spots where the conditions are just a little bit better than the surrounding area. We're not talking about a 5-acre weed flat. We're talking about a 5-foot square patch of gravel next to a tiny trickle of fresh water. These micro-locations are oases in the underwater desert. They concentrate baitfish, which in turn concentrates predators. Your job as a winter angler is to stop thinking big and start thinking incredibly small. So how do you identify these oxygen-rich zones from above the ice? You have to become a detective. Look for anything that introduces new water or churns existing water. A narrows between 2 sections of the lake where wind and current might still have a subtle effect under the ice is a great spot. Areas with visible springs on the shoreline are a dead giveaway, as that groundwater is often warmer and full of oxygen. Even a beaver dam's outflow, if it's still trickling, can create a tiny pocket of better water that will draw in fish from a surprisingly large area. You have to read the land to understand the lake. Let's zero in on springs, seeps, and inlets. These are the absolute magnets for dead-of-winter pike. A small creek entering the lake, even if it looks frozen on top, is bringing in a constant supply of highly oxygenated water. This creates a plume of life-giving water that can extend 100 yards or more out into the lake. The baitfish will stack up in this plume, and the pike will be right there with them, lying on the edges. These are not always marked on maps. You find them by walking the shorelines in the fall or looking for irregularities in the snow and ice that suggest moving water underneath. But what if you're on a lake that is basically a featureless bowl? How do you find the spot on a massive, flat basin? You look for substrate changes. A subtle transition from mud to sand or sand to gravel can be enough to hold life. Why? Because these harder bottom areas are less likely to be choked with decaying, oxygen-sucking muck. They offer a slightly cleaner environment. Also, any remaining green weeds, no matter how small or sparse, are a sign of life and slight oxygen production. Finding a single, tiny patch of green coontail in a muddy basin can be like finding a gold mine. Once you find these potential spots, your presentation has to match the fish's mood. This is where subtlety becomes king. Forget aggressive ripping and loud rattles. You want a lure or bait that hangs in the water, quivering, with minimal movement. A dead stick with a large live bait is a classic for a reason. For artificials, think of lures that have a slow, seductive glide on the fall, like a spoon you barely lift, or a jig and plastic that you just let soak, shaking it gently in place. You want to present the easiest possible meal. Your lure should look like it's already dead or dying. Let's debunk the myth of lure color and size for a moment. People obsess over hot pink versus chartreuse. In the dark water of midwinter, under a blanket of snow and ice, contrast is far more important than a specific hue. A solid black or a solid white lure will often outperform a fancy multicolored one because it creates a sharper silhouette for a pike to see from a distance. As for size, while big pike can eat big baits, sometimes a smaller, more natural-sized offering is more convincing. It looks like a more manageable, energy-efficient snack for a lethargic fish. Don't be afraid to downsize when the bite is tough. So, here it is, the big secret that ties all of this together. Pike don't just find one oxygen-rich spot and sit there. They are actively but slowly following the subtle seams and trails of oxygenated water as they shift and move. Imagine invisible rivers of good water flowing through the lake. Pike use these as hunting corridors. They will slowly patrol the edges of these oxygen plumes, moving from one potential feeding area to another, always staying within the life-sustaining zone. They are on a very specific path, and the reason you are failing is that you are drilling holes randomly hoping to land on a fish. You need to find their highway. How do you map and target these invisible corridors? It requires a change in mindset and a lot of drilling. Start at a likely source like a creek inlet. Drill a line of holes moving away from it. Use an underwater camera or even just your flasher to look for signs of life. Baitfish, green weeds. When you find them, you've found the corridor. Now, instead of fishing just one hole, work the entire line. The pike aren't stationary. They are on the move along this path. By drilling a series of holes, you are essentially setting a trap line, ready to intercept a cruising fish as it makes its rounds. It's a systematic approach, not a lucky guess. Let's put it all together into a new strategy. Before your next trip, study a map. Identify potential oxygen sources, inlets, narrows, springs. When you get to the lake, don't just go to your old spot. Go to one of these new zones. Start drilling. Work from the source outwards, looking for that subtle sign of life. Once you find it, set up along that line. Use dead sticks or tip-ups to cover the corridor, and jig very subtly in one or two holes. Be patient. You're not waiting for a random fish to swim by. You are waiting for a fish to come down a specific, predictable path. You are no longer just fishing, you are ambushing the ambusher. So, the big secret isn't a magic lure, it's the simple, hidden truth that pike in the dead of winter are not stationary. They are nomads on a desperate search for oxygen, traveling along invisible highways that concentrate them into tiny, predictable areas. For years, we've been standing still, waiting for them to come to us. The reality is, we need to find the paths they travel. This one shift in thinking, from fishing spots to fishing corridors, can be the difference between a frustrating day of staring at a hole in the ice and the thrill of a flag flying when no one else is getting a bite. It's a total game changer. Thank you so much for watching. If this blew your mind a little, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next video. And now I have a question for you. Based on this, what's the first secret spot on your home lake that you're now going to try? Let's talk about it in the comments below.